Hey guys, this is National Master Wesley Falcao, and welcome to episode 4 of Chess with Wes, the long awaited episode 4. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I decided not to do this online in a Zoom meeting because it was hard to get people to come at the exact time and agree to meet. So I prefer now to just do this offline and then get your feedback later. In this episode, I'm going to continue this theme of truth in chess, but a different type of truth, which is the truth about the player. We've so far looked at truth from an objective truth in chess and the truth of positions, but players are different. Humans make the game of chess really interesting. And knowing the truth about yourself and knowing the truth about your opponent can be really important in not just in life, but also, well, I should say not just in chess, but also in life. And I hope you don't have many opponents in life. I'm going to reflect on that later. You want to know the truth about the people you encounter and the situations they are in, and how you can use that truth to help them or to get the most out of their gifts which they have to offer. Not use them in that sense, but to help them discover their true potential and to have them use it to its fullest. So to start off this lecture, I'm gonna show you a game that was played by Tal on the left against the then world champion Mikhail Botvinnik. So this was Tal's first challenge match against Mikhail Botvinnik. And so it's as serious as it gets. Tal was challenging for the crown. And this was from round 17 of their championship. And Tal played pawn to e4 as he often did in that match, and Botvinnik played the Caro-Kann. e4, d5, knight c3, takes, bishop f5, knight g3, and the game developed in this fashion: takes, bishop g5, knight bd7, Tal castles kingside, queen a5, and now Tal had a think, and he made what he describes is the best move of this match. So I have this book of Tal's, The Life and Games of Mikhail Tal. And in this book, he describes his thoughts about this position. Now, first of all, Tal understood, when he looked at this position, he understood that white doesn't have any advantage. This bishop on g5 is under attack by the queen, and if the bishop drops back, that's just admitting defeat and you've got nothing in the position. He could play a move like queen to d2, defend that bishop, but then black simply swaps off queens, and again the game moves in the direction of a draw. But what else could he do? Something like queen c1 is extremely passive, and that's not going to threaten black in any way. What other moves are there? There's only another move to defend this bishop, which is pawn to f4. But that's just so ugly, because now this bishop is trapped by its own pawn and it doesn't have much mobility. It can take this knight, but that's almost always in black's favor. And the other problem with this is that this opens this diagonal to white's king, which will be exposed here. So there were all these sorts of problems with this move, and Tal obviously understood that within a few seconds. But suddenly he began to think of the advantages of this move, and here's where he says something really insightful. And he said, "At first I became somehow embarrassed, for the drawbacks to this move are more obvious than to any other one. Less apparent are the advantages of this move, but they do exist, although not in a purely chess sense. In the first place, the move demands a refutation," pretty interesting, "which should be accompanied by the possibility of a double-edged tactical struggle, and this, to judge by Botvinnik's style in the match, would be undesirable for him. Secondly, the weakening of white's position can only be exploited by an undermining of the center, and after moves such as c5 or e5, the power of the white bishops will be significantly increased. Finally, black can attack white's kingside only by castling queenside, but then white can set up in motion his own queenside pawns. And white will have an attack in that position. So Tal understood that this move, pawn to f4, was not to Botvinnik's liking, and it would force Botvinnik to play in a way that Botvinnik doesn't like, and it might help create some counter chances for Tal, and in this game he was right. I'm gonna quickly go through how the game went. Botvinnik castles long because he has to refute that move, and now Tal begins his plan of pushing pawns on the queen side. Botvinnik at some point mishandles the position. As Tal mentioned, he had to open up the center with a move like pawn to e5, but Botvinnik, fearing perhaps Tal's prowess in the open positions and his own fear of open positions and the fact that Tal has two bishops, refrained from that. The point here was f takes, bishop takes, you cannot take because the queen's hanging. And it could have been something like c3, bishop takes g3, and this is in black's favor, I'm afraid, but Botvinnik didn't go for this. Instead, he went for this bad move, bishop to e7, and which simply allowed Tal to start. He traded off those bishops and start pushing his pawns. And the game went quite even from this point on. No side was winning it, but in this final position, Botvinnik made one decisive mistake here, and instead of playing the move king to a8 and safeguarding his king, Botvinnik blundered with queen d5 again because he couldn't handle the stress of the position, and Tal smashed him here with rook takes pawn. And if pawn takes pawn, then of course check, king here, check, and that rook's falling and he's losing the game. So Botvinnik came back here, but then queen a4, this pawn is pinned, cannot play this because of rook checkmate or check, and he's losing, so he resigned the game. So that was a great understanding from Tal about using his own skills, his own tactical prowess, and realizing that Botvinnik won't be able to use his strategic prowess if Tal played a move like that. So that was an excellent choice. Next, we're going to see the match between Vladimir Kramnik and Garry Kasparov, which was played in the year 2000. Garry Kasparov, of course, at this time was the undisputed #1 chess player in the world, and I want you to understand the personality of the two players. So let's look at a video here that I'm going to share with you, and have a look at this video. This is Garry Kasparov playing against Nigel Short. Kasparov is going to be on the scene in a moment. And what we see here is that this arbiter is getting too close to the board, and now watch Kasparov's reaction. He's like, what are you doing? So he's a no-nonsense guy. He doesn't tolerate anything like that, and Korchnoy's reaction is pretty amusing as well. Hey, take a look at this game. This is a friendly game between Grandmaster Yasser Seriawan and Garry Kasparov. So let me skip to the relevant section here. Garry Kasparov, it will be a one-on-one match. What do you have to say now? I have a tissue company. May I, Garry? He's trying to trash talk with Garry Kasparov, but look at his reaction. He's not amused at all. It's a friendly game, but he's not amused with this humor and this trash talking. And if we scroll to the end of the game, looking more and the game has ended in a draw. Comeback by Yasser. Very bad. It was bad. The game is drawn, and Kasparov, he is upset. He is not happy with the result of the game. Now compare this with Vladimir Kramnik, and this is a game that's a serious game. It was played in the World Blitz Championship in 2019.
To start the round, good luck to everybody. Please start your clocks.
And the game goes on, but let me go towards the end of this game, which is where the real action is. So the game is drawn after an intense struggle, but Kramnik's smiling, and so is Nakamura. If it were Kasparov, I can assure you he would not be smiling at this point after such a long struggle. So that gives you a perspective on the personality of these players. So now that we've mentioned that, let's look at how Kasparov's fiery personality shows up in his games. Now I'm going to just show you a sample game. This was played between Garry Kasparov and Evgeny Vladimirov in the year 2001. It was a rapid game, and the game went like this: e4. It was a Roy Lopez. I'm going to skip through the opening moves of this game. It was a pretty standard theory. Nothing's quite happening just yet. Kasparov slowly begins to maneuver his knight towards the black king, and that's pretty typical of Kasparov to go for attacks. And this is all okay. Knight g5. Now he's threatening to play bishop takes f7, so Vladimirov defends, and this is move 15. It's hard to imagine that 10 moves later the game was over. And Kasparov played knight g4. Takes, queen takes is still okay, but now he's eliminated one of the defenders of the black king here, and now these pawns start to look a little bit loose. So anyway, bishop c8, queen h4, h5, queen g3. So Kasparov has managed to create some weaknesses here. King g7, trying to hold up these weaknesses. Bishop d5 attacks that rook, rook b8, h4 strengthening this knight, queen d7, queen e3, and now Vladimirov completely misjudged Kasparov's threats in the position and played bishop b7, which allowed Kasparov to unleash knight h7. The point being, of course, takes, then check, king here, and takes. Now this king is completely exposed, and next he might take on h5, bring up his rooks this way, and that should be game over. And it's game over anyway after bishop takes d5, because Kasparov played queen h6, king g8, bishop g5, and Vladimirov threw in a move, bishop takes e4, and actually just resigned the game because Kasparov would have finished him with a move like knight f6 check, take, and mate on g7. So that's the fiery nature of Kasparov and his games. And Vladimir Kramnik, of course, he was a pupil of Kasparov, so he knew Garry Kasparov's strengths and weaknesses. And Vladimir Kramnik, on the other hand, is a guy who he's more laid back, he's more chilled, he's relaxed, and he can play calm positions and end games, and with positions that require a lot of slow maneuvering and one or two move combinations to get a small advantage. That's the style of Kramnik. So Kramnik was acutely aware of the differences between him and Kasparov, and in order to counter Kasparov, Kramnik realized that he had to get rid of Kasparov's queen, because the queen was Kasparov's strongest chess piece, and he would often get his attacks going with his queen and other pieces. He would sacrifice a lot of pieces, but as long as his queen remained alive, he would often go for the enemy king, and it would soon be checkmate. So Kramnik realized that he had to get Kasparov into endgame positions. He wanted to slowly but surely get rid of Kasparov's queen. And if he managed to do that, then he was making Kasparov play in a way that's not true to his own personality. You see what I mean? Kasparov would be forced to act in a way that's not himself, and that's a huge struggle in chess to play in a way that's contrary to how you are in real life. Like if you're a really aggressive person, if you're an assertive person, it's hard for you to play chess which is calm and poised. You are more often looking for conflict, but if you're a person who doesn't like immediate direct confrontation, you're probably looking for more calm positions where you can kind of lay back and maneuver your pieces. So let's see what Kramnik came up with. So Kasparov played e4 all throughout most of this match, but Kramnik had a huge surprise for him. And I'm sure Kasparov had a lot of ideas if Kramnik went for his Petrov defense. But in this case, Kramnik went for knight c6, bishop b5, and now Kramnik surprised Garry Kasparov with knight to f6, which was not a move that was popular at the top grandmaster level. And the only real way, the only principled way to get an advantage against this opening is to castle, allow black to take this pawn like this, and then play pawn to d4, and black will reply knight d6, attack this bishop, so he has to take, trades off another piece, takes, knight f5, and now white again has to play queen takes queen check, trade off the queens, and now try to exploit the fact that this king is exposed in the center like that. But you see what Kramnik has achieved here. He has traded off Kasparov's queen in the first 8 moves, and that is a huge advantage for Kramnik. Kasparov could have played something like pawn to d3 to keep his queens on the board, but Kramnik knew that Garry Kasparov would not do that, because this is pretty much an admission of defeat, saying, hey, I cannot attempt to beat you in the endgame, and so I'm going to try to slowly maneuver and see if I can get an advantage. And knowing Garry Kasparov and his self-confidence, or maybe his ego, Kramnik knew that Kasparov wasn't going to go for that, and he didn't throughout the whole match. So Kasparov went for this, and I'm just going to briefly show you the first game. Take, take. He tried to maneuver his pieces, but Kramnik was more than ready for that sort of battle. And after a bit of shuffling around, Kramnik was able to neutralize any activity that white had, play knight e7, and then play knight f5, offering a trade of these 2 pieces. And the game was drawn because Kasparov realized he's got nothing more in this position. Let's move forward to game 3. And once again, Garry Kasparov. Now, by the way, in game 2, Kramnik beat Kasparov in a nice position with white. So Kramnik's leading 1-0 at this point. And game 3, again, Kasparov wanted to fight, and he wanted to refute that setup which Kramnik had come up with, and that was a mistake, because Kramnik had prepared this line and this endgame for months for Garry Kasparov, whereas this was something new to Kasparov. So I guess Kasparov's own ego or whatever it is that he was thinking was forcing him to go into this position to try to be himself and refute Kramnik and beat him in the endgame, which he was not able to do. He tried in game 3, takes, 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 again queen trade forced, knight c3, a lot of struggle. He found some nuance here with knight f4 trying to go immediately on d5, but Kramnik now made an extremely precise move, rook to g8, defending this pawn, also getting out of this fire of this bishop, and that neutralized Garry Kasparov's advantage, and Garry didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to forcibly proceed here, so he had to drop his knight back. But that pretty much is an admission that I don't have any forceful way of breaking through in the position, and I have to play like Kramnik, which is already a psychological victory for Kramnik, because then he was able to maneuver and chop off pieces. This is Kramnik style. He just trades pieces, gets it into a pure endgame, and there he's more sure of himself and what he's doing, because he just knows how to control his pieces in the endgame. And Kasparov tried, but Kramnik was up to the task, and after a lot of exchanges, despite having a strong pass pawn, Kramnik was in control, and he managed to win Kasparov's rook here. And after a lot of trades, the game was finally drawn in this rook and pawn endgame. The players agreed to draw here. So 2-1 for our Kramnik's leading 1-0 at this point. And it's not clear if Garry Kasparov understood Kramnik's strategy, because if we see in the next game, Kasparov in this game tried Queen's Gambit accepted. Right on the 7th move, Kramnik played pawn takes pawn, offering a trade of queens, which Kasparov had to take, because otherwise Kramnik himself takes. And if he moves his queen away, then, well, he's wasting time trying to grab this pawn, and Kramnik could perhaps accelerate his development here. So Kasparov is forced to trade, and rook takes. So already, even with white, Kramnik has managed to get rid of Kasparov's queen on the 8th move. And it's not known if Garry Kasparov understood this early in the match, or if he did and he was helpless, he was not able to stop it. But either way, it was an excellent execution from Kramnik to be able to get Kasparov into the type of positions that Kramnik was more comfortable with, and where Kasparov would not be able to be himself and play his aggressive chess that he's well known for. This game, actually, Kasparov survived. Kramnik was able to put a lot of pressure on Kasparov with his technical endgame moves, but towards the end, Kramnik made some inaccuracies, and he completely blew a winning position where he was up a piece. I'm skipping through these moves because they're not relevant to the discussion that we're having here, but just want to show you the game for completion's sake. So here, Kramnik's up a piece, and Kasparov is losing, but Kramnik was surprisingly not able to finish him off in this game, and Kasparov managed to escape with a draw in this position. And the game was drawn. That was game 4. Moving on, game 5. So Garry Kasparov realized, okay, I can't defeat Kramnik's Berlin defense, so let me try something else. So he tried the English opening with white. And let's see how Kramnik managed to get him again into one of his positions. So Queen A4, getting aggressive, trying to pin this knight, maybe start some activity on the queen side, because Kramnik invites him into the position, and now plays knight d7, defending this pawn. Kasparov played d3, Kramnik castled, bishop e3, and now Kramnik executes this maneuver, knight d4, takes, knight e4, and queen b6, trading off the queens. And again, Kasparov either has to retreat and maybe then he drops this pawn, or he has to trade off queens, which he did, and Kramnik was able to easily draw this game. Moving on, this is game 8, and Kramnik's playing white in this position, and Kasparov tried the Nimzo Indian defense. Now again, Kramnik smartly chose this line, which is known for the exchange of queens. C takes D now, and black has to play knight takes D, but now Kramnik's happy to swap off queens, and you get the idea. So this has been Kramnik's strategy throughout this match. He's just swapping off Kasparov's queen, and Kasparov, I don't know if he realized it or he was helpless, he couldn't stop it, and he was not playing to his strengths there. And that showed in the next game again when Kasparov tried once more to beat the Berlin defense. Of course, he came prepared with fresh ideas, but again, he was not fighting on his own turf. And despite the fact that he came prepared, Kramnik was able to neutralize his preparation and steer the game towards a draw. And that was game 9. And game 11, again Garry Kasparov. This is a 16-game match, and at this point, Kasparov is trailing by 2 games, I think. And he's still trying to take a crack at Kramnik's Berlin defense, which proved to be the wrong strategy. Well, in this case, Kramnik did not play the Berlin defense. He played this Archangel's, I guess that's how we pronounce it, line. And again, in this line, it's pretty interesting what Kramnik did. Bishop b7, d3, castles, knight c3, knight a5, offering Kasparov this pawn. But Kramnik has a really interesting idea. Takes this bishop off. Kramnik's happy. Now Kasparov, he takes this guy, so Kasparov has to trade rooks. Again, Kramnik is simply swapping off pieces. And yes, Kasparov wins a pawn, but Kramnik has the 2 bishops, and now with pawn to d5, Kasparov is again, to have any sort of initiative, is forced to play bishop g5, but that allows Kramnik to take here and laugh in his face with queen takes queen, trading off queens again. And well, what could he do? b4, takes, and he at least wins the exchange, but now Kramnik has 2 bishops for Kasparov's rook, and Kasparov has 2 extra pawns, and that was not enough for Garry Kasparov to win this game. So again, great execution by Kramnik. Game 13 is when Kasparov again tried to beat the Berlin defense, but this time it showed that he's got nothing. Takes, knight f5, take, knight c3, h6, h3, and I think Kramnik surprised him with king e8, knight e4, c5, c3, b6, and Kasparov played g4 and offered a draw. He was finished. He just didn't think he could break this defense anymore. But more than the defense, I think it was him getting into the wrong types of position which were not suited to his natural gifts, and maybe it was his ego that got into the way, and he said to himself, I can deal with anything, and didn't realize his own weaknesses and didn't play to his own strengths in this match. And that was the end of Garry Kasparov's match, and he lost that match to Kramnik, and Kramnik was the deserved winner. And after that point, everyone started playing the Berlin defense because that was a revolution started by Kramnik. In 2008, a similar match happened between Vishy Anand and Vladimir Kramnik, and of course Anand had seen what had happened in the match against Kasparov, and he was not willing to let Kramnik dictate the terms of the fighting territory, because he understood that Kramnik likes these end games, technical end games, and exchanging of queens and making more precise moves. But Anand was like, nah, I'm not gonna give you that. So Anand instead decided to not use e4 at all. He just played d4 throughout this whole match. It was a 12-game match instead of a 16-game match. And well, in this first game, there was actually Kramnik who played white. But in the first game, they were just testing each other out. And as you can see, Kramnik here played a pretty simple opening. exchanged pieces, went into the endgame, but that was not a threat for Vishy Anand because unlike Kasparov, he can play the endgame without much trouble. It doesn't bother him that he doesn't get really aggressive positions. Anand's pretty cool-headed, and despite being a pawn down here, he's got opposite colored bishops and great activity with his rooks. So the first game was drawn without too much difficulty by Anand, and he just won that extra pawn again, and the game was drawn. Game 2 really showed Anand's strategy in this match because he began with d4. He was not going to play e4 and let Kramnik play the Berlin defense and trade off his queen. Is like, no, I'm not giving you that. So he played this match with a lot of fire and a lot of energy. And he tried creating imbalances in this position. Like, as you can see here already, this is an asymmetrical position. There's no way black can have the same pawn structure as white. So these types of positions are more lively because they can help you create these, or they're already imbalanced and they can allow for more dynamic play, which is not exactly suited to Kramnik's style, who likes more like precise or technical sort of positions. So that was a great choice by Anand, and now his queen is pretty safe from any queen trades from Kramnik. Although Kramnik played reasonably in this game, and after some shuffling around, Anand had to allow him to trade queens, but still he tried to fight in the endgame, but Kramnik was up to the task. And in this position, Kramnik played rook d4, and the game was drawn without much fight left. Game 3, and Anand showed his preparation with black. In this position, takes 6, b5, bishop d3, a6, c5, and he went for this Semislav Maran system, and which already, as you can see, there's lots of action happening. Pawn takes knight, g takes f6. Now look at these pawns here. This is clearly not a balanced position. It's an imbalanced position. Now there's rook can come out to g8 and attack g2. And so there's a lot of dynamism in this position. And that's exactly the kind of position that is not suited to Kramnik's styles. That's the preparation that Anand went in with for Kramnik. Castles, queen b6, queen e2. And now in this position, before this game, a lot of players had tried b4 or bishop a6 trying to defend this pawn, but Anand simply ignored that, played bishop b7, forcing Kramnik to take here to have any sort of advantage. And now Anand went for his king with bishop d6, and it was a fascinating game. Rook d1, rook g8. Now as you can see, he's forcing Kramnik into this technical fight, and Kramnik was not ready for that. g3, rook g4, bishop takes, knight takes. Kramnik tried to fight here, takes, rook takes d7, but Anand was precise. King f8, queen d3, rook g7, trades off white's only active piece. Now he's got to take this bishop, and now that's opened up this king, and Anand was able to gang up on that king with his remaining pieces, and he went on to later win Kramnik's queen and finish off the game with this combination. So that was game 3. In game 5, Kramnik in a way it repeated the mistake that Kasparov made of going into that same position, which was not to his style. He should have perhaps he should have played something else and not challenged Anand's preparation. I think that in defense of Kramnik a little bit, this was 2008. The computers were a lot more advanced than in 2000. So it was possible to analyze a position and get a much better understanding of the position than Kasparov could in the year 2000. And that too, Berlin even now is a more solid defense than this line played by Anand. I think Anand's line is also fine, but it's much easier with the computers to find concrete lines in this position. So Kramnik in game 5 repeated that same idea, or rather allowed Anand to repeat that same idea with bishop b7 takes, but now it was again Anand who surprised him. Instead of playing bishop d6, Anand played rook g8, and Kramnik played bishop f4, and the game went on. Anand's happy to play a pawn down on the queen side as long as he's got this dynamic activity on the king side. He's pretty much saying you can have an extra pawn, but I have so much activity on the king side that you can't really exploit that pawn advantage. Bishop h4, bishop e7, a4, bishop takes, and king e7. Kramnik, till this point, he was playing okay, but now he came to this critical point in this match where after this move, b4, rook c3, Kramnik made a huge blunder and played knight takes pawn, and he miscalculated this because obviously he saw queen takes, and then his point was rook d1 attacking the queen, and the queen, if the queen moves away, he takes this knight here. So black would play knight f6, which he saw, rook takes, knight takes queen, rook d7, king f6, takes his bishop, and he had probably already seen rook c1 and bishop back to f1, and Kramnik thought that he was safe in this position. He might have seen something like knight takes h2, but then after king takes, rook takes bishop onto f3, white has these two dangerous pass pawns on the queen side, and there's no way that black can even hope to win this game. It's black who is struggling to save this position. So that was Kramnik's, that's probably what Kramnik saw, but he failed to see this move from Anand, which is knight to e3. And surprisingly, this is a type of move which Anand had already prepared in his match preparation for this game, which is quite stunning. And the point here is, of course, after takes, pawn takes, this bishop is pinned to this king, and black is simply threatening pawn to e2. There's no stopping that, and black's gonna queen and win the game. So Kramnik resigned this game, and that was that. That was already 5 games in the match, and Anand's leading 2-0. And in the next game, we'll see something really amusing. d4, knight f6. Anand's playing white again. c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4, queen c2, d5 takes, queen takes. You can't take here, of course, because it's check. Knight f3. Kramnik played queen f5, which is a standard move, but he's offering a trade of queens, which is still the most common move in the position. But Anand's like, no, I know you. I'm not here to trade off your queen and give you an endgame position. I'm gonna play queen b3, keep the queens on the board, and force you to play a complex middle game. It's a great choice by Anand. And now he maneuvered his pieces, attacked the queen. Queen came here, rook here. After a lot of shuffling, now in this position, he said, okay, I can take your queen here on my terms, because now I have 2 extra bishops in this position. I have a nice rook placed on the open c file. This bishop's coming here, and pretty much I'm spoiled for choice in this position, whereas Kramnik had to find good defensive moves, which was not able to, and Anand was able to capitalize here and win a nice endgame. And I won't go into the technical details, but Anand won this round 6, and it was 3-0 already. So now Kramnik's in a difficult situation, because if he plays his style of, trade off queens and go into the endgame, then for someone like Anand, it's not too difficult to hold draws in the endgame, because he doesn't, unlike Kasparov, Anand doesn't mind defending positions. So Anand can do that. So Kramnik made a mistake, I would say, in in this match, trying to give end games to Anand, because now after leading 3-0, now Anand's playing white in this position. Anand's more than happy to trade pieces and simply go into an endgame. That's not playing to his weaknesses as such, because rook c1, sure, I can trade pieces and I can draw the game, and it's round 7 already. I have 5 more rounds to go, and I'm gonna keep my world championship crown. So that was again a poor choice from Kramnik to go into this sort of an endgame, because he's got nothing here, and Anand's leading 3-0 at this point. And Anand was able to, without much difficulty, go on and draw this game. And that was that. We move on to round 8, and let's see if Kramnik is playing white. Let's see if Kramnik has learned from the previous encounter. Check, take. Again, Kramnik swaps of pieces, and more piece swaps. He's again going into a sort of technical endgame position, but that's not gonna help Kramnik, because Anand's more than up to the task, and again he was easily able to maneuver his pieces and hold Kramnik to a draw in this position, and there was nothing Kramnik could do. So round 9, and Kramnik now has to complicate, so that's what he does, but it's a little bit too late, because now he only has 4 more rounds left, and he's got to win 3, which is going to be really difficult against an opponent like Anand. So he goes for this imbalanced position, which is exactly what he should do, but now his problem is that he is not suited to playing these type of positions. And so the game goes like this. Anand's playing white here. Takes, castles, takes. Anand's happy to trade pieces, because he's like, I can hold a draw in this position. c5, and this looks more like Anand's playing black rather than playing white, but it is actually Anand's who is playing white in this position, and it is Kramnik playing black, and Kramnik's effectively having to play like Anand to beat Anand, which is not going to work in this position. Takes, and a5. Anand is happy to swap of pieces, and again Kramnik cannot do much here other than going into this endgame, but that's not too difficult for Anand, and he managed to draw this game. Trade queens, and this endgame is just easily drawn for Vishy. So that was round 9. So now 10, 11, 12, 3 rounds left, and Kramnik is down 3 points. He's got to win all 3. So how does round 10 go? Kramnik playing white, and he cannot go into a queen trade type of position, so he goes for the Cataline, which is pretty good. And here, amazingly though, he still goes for the queen trade, because he realizes that in this position he will still get a reasonable endgame, and he's counting on his endgame skills to be able to win that position, and Vishy in fact correctly refused that offer and played queen h5. And after a little bit of shuffling, I think Anand felt the pressure of this game, and he misplayed by playing f6 in this position, and that allowed Kramnik to exert more pressure on his position, and queen d6, and his position was destroyed, and Anand resigned already in this position. It was a bit premature, I think, but nevertheless it was completely losing. So that was round 10. So is Kramnik making a comeback? And round 11 will show something really amusing that happened. So I'm going to show you a video of round 11, and this is Anand coming to the board in round 11. So he's waiting for Kramnik. The arbiter is going to start the clock on. Kramnik arrives. looks at the board and he's surprised because Anand has actually played a little bit ahead. So the board played 1 e4. He's not played d4. And that's put Kramnik in a lot of thought. He's adjusting his pieces, but in his mind he's still thinking, what am I going to do now? Because he was expecting Anand to play d4, as he did all throughout this match. And Anand threw him off by playing on to e4 instead. And now he spent a lot of time just on the first move, which is quite unusual for a super grandmaster and a world champion to do so. But Anand successfully threw him off again. And pretty much Anand saying to Kramnik, are you really going to play the Berlin defense? Because I know how to easily make a draw against you in that position. So Kramnik, knowing that, chose to play c5 and knight f3 and going the Sicilian defense with black. But then that was Anand's territory. He knew how to play these positions and played a reasonably safe one after a lot of, not a lot of, but a little bit of maneuvering in the middle game. Anand was able to trade off pieces and even trade off Kramnik's queen, because that's what he wants now. Sure, Kramnik is good in the end game, but then he won't be able to win this game. And Kramnik, realizing that, offered a draw in this position, effectively resigning the match, and congratulated Rishi Anand for a well played game and well played match. So that was an excellent piece of preparation from Anand for this match, and excellent execution as well. As I thought about these matches and how the players were able to understand each other's personality and strengths and weaknesses, I was reminded, of course, of a spiritual principle that I know of, and that's goes like this. There are varieties of gifts, and there are varieties of service, and there are varieties of working. And God gives different gifts to each person. He doesn't give the same gifts to all of us, so that we each have our own unique and individual talents, and we have to find out what it is that they are. And we got to work on using those to help others. There was a private revelation given to one of the saints in the Catholic Church, where God said that I distribute the virtues diversely. I don't give the same thing. I have not given everything to one single person, so that you may be constrained to practice charity, which is really the highest form of love in the Greek, towards one another. I have willed that one should need another, and that all should be my ministers in distributing the graces and gifts that they have received from me. And chess makes me realize more than, I guess, most people, that there are so many different ways of playing chess and still arriving at the same outcome. There's been so many world champions with so many different styles, but they've still been world champions. They've still been the best in the world, which tells me that it's not so much about style, but it's how effectively you use it. I think it's something that's from an Ip Man movie as well. It's not about style, it's about you, and it's about how effectively you use the gifts which you've been given. So first of all, you got to identify what it is that you've been given, and you got to think about how I can use that to spread God's kingdom, to help others, to serve others, because that's how God designed us. He didn't design us to be individuals who are independent of one another. He designed us to be dependent on one another, and use our gifts, our talents, to help others. And we gotta see that in in our colleagues, in our friends. We got to appreciate, okay, who's got what gift, and how can we um, create an environment where they can use their gift so that has everyone benefits from their gifts. Like if no one, if you never have need for anyone's gifts, then they feel left out, like no one really needs me. Because you could do something by yourself, but you could ask someone for help so that they have an opportunity to exercise their gifts which they've been given to help you, even though you could do it by yourself. But if they have a gift for that, um, then it's nice, it's more loving to have them come over and give you a helping hand. Like for example, I'm not a gifted painter. Can I paint my apartment? Sure, with some, I could watch some YouTube tutorials and see how painting's done, and but that's not something that comes naturally to me. I could have to work to acquire that skill, and surely I could do it that way, be more independent. But hey, I could invite a friend who knows painting, say, hey, can you give me a hand? Can you show me how this is done? And give them an opportunity to exercise their gifts. So that's my little spiritual reflection. And I also reflected on how is it that my own personality reflects in the game of chess. And what I've seen is pretty obviously is that I'm a mischievous guy. I like innocent mischief, but that shows in my chess. And some of you may know that I invented this opening called the Drunken Master opening. How did that come about? It was a reflection of my personality, and that showed in the way I played chess. So to wrap up this lecture, I'm going to show you a game from that Drunken Master opening, and I hope you really enjoy it like I did. So this game was played in January of 2021, January 25. My opponent is MadStore9, rated 2288. I was playing on Lichess using my Drunken Master account. The link will be in the description. I'm playing black, so let's go. D4, D6. This is a blitz game. C4, G6. Seems like I'm playing some sort of Pierce defense or King's Indian, but no, C6. Or modern defense. G3, E6. Bishop G2, A6. Castle, B6. Now you're getting the sense of the mischief. B3, Rook A7, Bishop B2, F6. E4, Rook G7. Now you see what black is doing. He's gonna attack the king side and start rolling his pawns down white's king. Knight C3, H5. Of course, this is not sound chess. And if you analyze this with a computer, the computer will show you various ways of refuting this setup and getting an advantage for white. But where's the fun in that? If you play perfect chess all the time, then you would most likely have draws all the time, if chess is a draw, objectively speaking. But it's the imperfection that we have that allows for this sort of creativity and beauty to come about. So E5, G5. All right, I'm just going to push. Pawn takes, knight takes, bishop E7. It's important to not give him any sort of discoveries on this diagonal, or to unpin this pawn so that this pawn is free to move or capture this way without exposing the king. So bishop E7. Knight E4, take. And now he's eyeing this, but I can always play pawn to E5 if that's the case. Pawn to G4, pushing ahead. Knight E1, pawn to D5, locking this guy so he doesn't have, this pawn is not moving. So that was the point of D5. And pawn to G4 first, so that once you play D5, he doesn't have knight to E5 later on. So push his knight back first, then play D5. Rook goes back, now H4. Open up his position. Knight D3, take. And now look at this, Rook, King D7. Because I see that his knight is coming here anyway, so my king might as well get out of the way, get here to safety on this side, which connects my queen and rook, and my queen's going to come down on the king side. So let's see how that happens. Knight F4, Rook H6 defending this. Queen C2, and now Queen H8 attacking H2. or attacking or ganging up on the h file. Now I'm going to play rook h7 next, like that, and now I have this huge threat down the h file of checkmate. And this Alekin's gun formation is just so amazing, especially when your king's hanging loose here on d7. But that's my mischief showing in this game. So f3 takes, bishop d6. Okay, I play calm, I stay calm. Bishop c1, queen takes d4. He drops the pawn, and that really puts the game into my hands, because queen g7 now attacking g3, rook g2. But now I can trade one pair of rooks, get into his position, and play e5, start pushing my pawns at him. Queen f7 threatening e4, take, king e2, knight c6, bishop g4 check, king c7, he takes, but he misses. Queen f1 check, king d2, queen e1 check, king e4, and finally e4 is checkmate. An amazing game. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you did too. And I would urge you to think about your own personality and see how that reflects in the way you play chess, and maybe that shows you a thing or two about your own self. So I hope you enjoyed this small episode 4, and I look forward to seeing you in future episodes. Thanks for watching.